cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding. We, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This meeting of the Honorable Senate for Friday, November the 3rd, 2023 is called to order. Members, we have Senator Janice Allen, who is waiting. Welcome, Senator Allen, who has requested to join us via Zoom. Those in favor? Thank you very much. Welcome, Senator Allen. Before we move to the business of the day, I want to take the opportunity to introduce the chamber to Ms. Lee Andrea Wilson. Stand up, please, Ms. Wilson, who is our new legislative counsel. She's coming from out of the court system. She was the clerk of courts for many years at the corporate area traffic court, and has always indicated interest in serving in the area of legislation, and so we welcome you to the Parliament. She was called to the bar in 2018. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: the Rainwater Harvesting Planning Guideline dated October 2023, a National Water Resources Master Plan for Jamaica, and the Water Resources Approved National Water Resources Master Plan Notice 2023 and its resolution under the Water Resources Act, and the General Consumption Tax Amendment of Schedules Number 2 Order 2023 and its resolution under the General Consumption Tax Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honorable House of Representatives. Petitions. Papers. Reports from committees. Notices of motions given orally. Questions and answers to... Sorry, Minister Samuda.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Whereas 16.1 of the Water Resources Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides the Water Resources Authority shall prepare and submit to the Minister for approval a draft National Water Resource Master Plan for Jamaica. And whereas pursuant to Section 16.1 of the Act, the authority prepared and on the 30th day of September 2022 submitted to the Minister for approval a draft National Water Resources Master Plan for Jamaica. And whereas Section 16.2 of the Act provides that the Minister shall not approve the draft or any revision thereof unless the Water Resources Advisory Committee has advised the Minister in respect thereof. But if the Advisory Committee does not give its advice within 90 days of the date request, therefore, and within such longer period as the Minister may in case allow, the Minister may act without such advice. And whereas pursuant to Section 16.2 of the Act, the Advisory Committee prepared and on the 5th day of July 2023 submitted to the Minister its advice on the draft National Water Resources Master Plan for Jamaica. And whereas Section 16.6a of the Act provides that if the Minister is satisfied with the draft master plan, the Minister shall, subject to affirmative resolution, by notice published in the Gazette, declare it to be the approved master plan and shall specify in such notice the date on which the master plan shall take effect. And whereas Section 16.6b of the Act provides that if the Minister is satisfied with the draft master plan, the Minister shall cause the approved plan to be published in the Gazette. And whereas on the 30th day of October 2023, the Minister by notice declared the draft National Water Resources Master Plan to be the approved master plan, and whereas it is desirable that the Water Resources approved National Water Resources Master Plan Notice 2023 be affirmed by resolution, and therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Water Resources approved National Water Resources Master Plan Notice 2023 resolution, and 2, the Water Resources approved National Water Resources Master Plan Notice 2023, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 3rd day of November 2023, is hereby affirmed.
Thank you, Minister Samuda. Questions and answers? I'm sorry.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Whereas by virtue of Section 60, subsection 1 of the General Consumption Tax Act, okay. Apparently it's not needed in this chamber, Mr. President. The tabling will stand on its own.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public Business Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is intended today to proceed with the debate on 2 bills, the Act to amend the Copyright Act and the Act to amend the Financial Administration and Audit Act number 2 of 2023. It is intended to take the bills in that order, and the first will be piloted by Senator the Honorable Auburn Hill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Minister Johnson-Smith. Minister Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. As mentioned, the bill before us is entitled an Act to amend the Copyright Act. And this, Mr. President, this amendment is required because the regulations that must accompany the bill are not yet in place. The Copyright Act was amended in 2015 Act, and the new section 87A was included to require the registration of all licensing bodies. Mr. President, it was further stipulated that no person shall carry on the activity of negotiating or granting of licenses on behalf of owners of copyright unless that person is a licensing body holding a certificate of registration. When the 2015 Act was enacted, there were 3 existing unregistered licensing bodies referred to as collective management organizations, or CMOs, operating in Jamaica, namely the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY, Jamaica Association of Composers, Authors and Publishers, JCAP, and Jamaica Music Society, JAMS. These organizations have been operating for over 20 years. Section 87A, therefore, provided for the regulation, or the regularization rather, of the activities of licensing bodies by requiring their registration with the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, JIPO. Further, Mr. President, Section 154 provides for a transitional period by way of an order by the Minister. This allows for a licensing body operating before the date of coming into operation of the Act to be required to satisfy the requirements for registration under Section 87A and any regulations in relation thereto within 6 months from the date or such longer period as the Minister, after consultation with the Executive Director, may by order prescribe. Mr. President, while the regulations were being drafted, 3 extensions of the transitional period were granted by order in 2018, 2019, and 2020, with the final extension having expired on May 2, 2021. Subsequently, Mr. President, the Attorney General's Chambers advised that the orders granted dated June 17, 2019 and June 5, 2020 were ultra vires to the Act, as the Act only provides for 1 extension, and as such, no further extension could be granted after the order granted in 2018. Therefore, Mr. President, the said CMOs continued to perform without registration in contravention of the Act. This was done in good faith. As a result of the aforementioned, Mr. President, it was determined that it was prudent to amend the transition period with retroactive effect to commence from July 30, 2015, since the order in 2018 was promulgated after the transition period had lapsed. This amendment is therefore intended to remove any uncertainty in relation to the validity of the actions taken by the CMOs since 2015. In light of the above, Mr. President, the bill is being amended to 1. Clarify the transitional provisions for the operation of unregistered organizations while no regulations prescribing the form, manner, and fees required for an application for a certificate of registration are in force, and 2, provide protection from liability for persons who, from the 30th day of July 2015, acted pursuant to Section 154 of the Act. Just to let it be known that the regulations are at the OPC, and the Ministry is following them carefully to get them through as quickly as possible. If it pleases you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris. Thank you very much, Senator Hill. Senator Morris, I'm recognizing you from a seat other than your own.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And, Mr. President, I rise to make a brief intervention where this legislation is concerned. And it is not a contentious piece of legislation. It's one that will receive our support. I just have 2 issues that I want to raise. And the first, Minister, is as it relates to the regulations relating to the Act, because the Act was passed in 2015, and we're now in 2023. 8 years have elapsed, and we have not seen the regulations brought to the Parliament for approval. And, you know, it is something that I know you have said that it's at the OPC, but recognizing the time that has elapsed, 8 years, I think that some priority needs to be brought to those legislation, those regulations. As a matter of fact, coming with this amendment should we should have seen the regulations accompanying this piece of legislation. And I really think, Minister, that you need to use all your influence, exert your influence, that the regulations can come to the Parliament within the next 3 months, I would say, would be a reasonable time. Because this thing has been languishing for too long, and it would have avoided this piece of legislation that you have here. The other thing that I want to raise, Minister, in a previous amendment to the Copyright Act, or the last amendment that was done, had raised the issue about the ratification of the Marrakesh Treaty. And there was a commitment and undertaking, or it was stated in the debate, that what was being done at the time was to put in place the regime that would allow the government to ratify the Marrakesh Treaty. So that legislation, that amendment was done, and we are here now, and I would like to know if the Marrakesh Treaty has been ratified by the government of Jamaica, and if it is not, when will it be ratified? Because that treaty is extremely important to individuals who are blind or have some form of print disability. And it is denying these individuals, and I could say us, of critical resources in terms of, accessing material that would be converted without going through the necessary copyright procedures. Take, for example, in my situation where I have to do extensive research, books and all of that sort of stuff that are available elsewhere. I'm not able to access those because of us not ratifying the Marrakesh Treaty at this point in time. So I would want you to give the Honorable Chamber an update on that, because we had gotten the undertaking that the Marrakesh Treaty would have been signed after that amendment was done. With those two comments, Mr. President, we support the amendment. May it please.
Thank you, Senator Dr. Morris. Minister?
I'm just waiting on, it might be on my phone, so I'm checking. Know how these things work these days. Thank you, Mr. President. On the matter of the delay, Senator Dr. Morris, I agree. And once I agree, you know that if I commit to get it done, and that's why I'm telling you it's at the OPC, I checked, and my team knows that I find ways to make sure we get back our legislation in time. So I'll be working on it. As long as it's on my table, it will not stay there. We will get it done. So I agree with you completely. The Marrakesh agreement, the treaty has been finalized, and it's just being reviewed, I understand, at this moment at the Foreign Ministry. So we're right here together. We'll get it done very quickly and get it signed. All right? Nobody is holding up anything. As much as you would like to pull me today. Second reading. Mr.
Well, I must say
President,
that that's really good news because we have discussed this before.
yes,
so it's
I'm
good
going
to
to
know.
ask that we have a second reading of the bill, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. The question is that the bill be read for a second time. Those in favor? Against?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Copyright Act and for Connected Matters, read a second time.
The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. Thank you. I put clauses 1, 2, and 3 for your approval. Those in favor? Against? I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Against? The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Against? I do report the bill as having passed committee without the committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Minister Hill.
Mr. President, I ask for a third reading of the bill. Thank you.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Copyright Act and for Connected Matters, read a third time and passed.
Thank you very much. Minister Johnson-Smith.
Mr. President, I now rise to lead the debate on the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act number 2, 2023. Mr. President, in recent times, Jamaica has achieved very encouraging economic results that have been bearing fruit for our people, and we continue to work to do so to an even greater extent. Our debt to GDP ratio has fallen to the lowest, most manageable level in decades. And the excellent management of public resources, and in particular public expenditure, has been recognized not only domestically but internationally as being well accomplished, especially through particularly difficult global times. The management of public resources means that the government has been able to do more in respect of providing better roads and water and other services and infrastructure for the benefit of all Jamaicans while borrowing less money. So we have been reducing the debt burden on the people of Jamaica while serving them better. Mr. President, this means, as a part of this, that we have to continue to work towards greater efficiency in the public service. And rationalization is a critical part of this, including, as you would recall, the integration, merger, closure, and divestment of various public bodies within the government structure. Mr. President, you'd recall that there was a policy on the categorization and rationalization of public bodies, which was developed by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service to apply a principle-based approach to the categorization and the rationalization of public bodies. Mr. President, when this policy was approved in 2016, a time-bound plan was developed to manage actions in respect of rationalizing public bodies, and a team was put together, including the Ministry of Finance, the Public Sector Transformation Implementation Unit, and they determined that the functions of the Audit Commission should be integrated within the ministry. So as part of, within all of the various actions that were being taken, this was one of the actions agreed. So that from an operational perspective and administrative perspective, the Audit Commission was integrated within the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service in 2018. The bill before us seeks to amend the legislative provisions to reflect and to support the administrative and operational realities of that integration within the ministry. And it seeks to do so primarily by repealing the provisions related to the Audit Commission contained in the Financial Administration and Audit Act, and with some connected matters. Mr. President, by way of background, or further background rather, the Audit Commission itself was established in April 2005 pursuant to Section 33C1 of the FAA Act. And it was charged with the responsibility for ensuring continued effectiveness of audit committees within government departments. So I want to make clear that the reference to audit committees within this amendment bill is not to audit committees of statutory bodies, or rather of subcommittees of boards of statutory bodies. These are audit committees which function within departments of government. So it's a slightly different kettle of fish. Mr. President, the commission had been established to ensure that their effectiveness, that is the effectiveness within government departments, was overseen and monitored. In 2009, the commission was enacted to be a body corporate by further amendments to the FAA, resulting in statutory establishment of its functions and authority. The commission was categorized when the policy for rationalization was developed. The Audit Commission was categorized as a Category 1 entity. And what does this mean? It was determined to be an entity that is non-commercial and budget funded, and it was identified as appropriately a public body. It was also determined that the Audit Commission's functions were necessary still, so it wouldn't be something that was shut down, that the government had a role in the provision of the activities that were being carried out by the Audit Commission, and that its functions could rationally be carried out in a ministry, department, or agency, because it was not A, a commercial entity, or B, a regulatory entity. It was further determined, therefore, that the functions of the Audit Commission could be easily transferred to the Internal Audit Directorate. Mr. President, this IAD, this Internal Audit Directorate, is a unit within the Public Expenditure Policy Coordination Division of the Ministry of Finance and Public Service, with a mandate to regulate the work of internal auditors through policy development and to review internal audit reports with the aim of identifying common issues of concern of a government-wide nature for discussion within the relevant policy unit for clarification or to effect changes. And it is to verify, also charged with the responsibility for verifying adherence to policies, guidelines, and international audit standards, among others. So, Mr. President, the Directorate had already been serving as a secretariat for the Commission. And when I list a few functions of the Commission, you will immediately recognize similarities with the Directorate's functions, which I just highlighted. So the Audit Commission, when it was established, was charged with reviewing Audit Committee's annual reports and taking necessary action, monitoring and evaluating the performance of the Audit Committees against their charters and relevant guidelines to ensure their continued effectiveness, promoting best practices in the operations of the committees through training and timely dissemination of information, requesting information and explanation of officers or other persons as deemed necessary if the performance of duties, in the performance of duties, and recommending to the Minister with responsibility for finance members for appointment or removal of an audit committee. So you can see that the Directorate was ideally positioned to absorb the functions of the Audit Commission. Mr. President, there is of course precedent within the Commonwealth on this approach, in that the integrated functions of the Audit Directorate are similar to those countries such as Canada, Ghana, Rwanda, and the UK. Mr. President, for emphasis, I want to state that the integration of the Audit Commission into the Internal Audit Directorate didn't mean that the functions of the Audit Commission had ceased, since the work of the Commission is an important apparatus to the integrity and accountability of government. Essentially, this integration preserved the independence of the audit committees within the governance framework of central government. And I just will point out a few clauses within the bill, given that most of the amendments are really the replacement of the words Audit Commission with the Internal Audit Directorate. And this is borne out in Clause 2, which inserts the appropriate, in the appropriate sequence, the definition for the Internal Audit Directorate. And it further amends Section 2 of the Principal Act by deleting from the definition of charter the words Audit Commission and substituting, of course, Internal Audit Directorate. Clause 3 does the same thing in respect of 33A and 33B, that is substituting Audit Commission for substitution Internal Audit Directorate for Audit Commission. And Clause 4 does the same in respect of the heading for 33C. And Clause 5, Mr. President, repeals the Section 33C of the Act. Clause 6A, Mr. President, provides for the amendment of 33D by deleting the marginal notes and substituting, therefore, reference to functions of the IAD. And subclause B further amends by deleting Audit Commission where it appears and substituting the IAD. Subclause C goes a bit further, Mr. President, but the amendments are grammatical to allow the flow of the provision, given the changes being made in respect of the Audit Committee and the IAD. But subclause E1 of Clause 6 provides for the amendment of 33 big D2 by deleting paragraph B and substituting a new paragraph B to read, recommend to the Cabinet Secretary the removal of any of the members of the Audit Committee. And subclause E2 of 6 is amended by deleting C of 33D. I must say, Mr. President, when I was first going through the brief and I saw this recommendation to the Cabinet Secretary for the removal of any of the members of the Audit Committee, I went back again to look at that to make sure that the Audit Committees were, in fact, as I understood and as I explained at the start of this debate, just that the thought that a Cabinet Secretary could change the membership of a subcommittee of a board had sounded strange to me. So I went back to verify that it was indeed that Cabinet Secretary, of course, as the head of the public service, would be making that independent action and ensuring the independence of the committees within departments of government to ensure that they are being monitored in an appropriate way. So it's not statutory body, or rather it's not subcommittees of boards, but again, audit committees within departments of government. So, Mr. President, it is important that the Senate note that with the repeal of the provisions establishing the Audit Commission, all its functions will be undertaken by the IAD, save the appointment and removal of members of the Audit Committee and their chairman. So again, for emphasis, this will be undertaken by the Cabinet Secretary on the recommendation of the IAD, as is outlined in Clause 6 that I just spoke to. And the rationale, again for emphasis, is to maintain the independence of the audit committees. Clause 7 repeals Sections 33E, F, G, H, and I of the Principal Act, and those are the clauses, or rather the sections of the bill that dealt with its operation as a body corporate, its finances and accounts. Those would no longer be relevant. And Clause 8 repeals and replaces 33J by substituting a new 33J, report on audit committees, that is, it deals with report on audit committees, and the new provision provides that the IAD is mandated to submit a report to the Cabinet Secretary and the Minister dealing with the activities of the audit committee during the relevant financial year, immediately at the end of each financial year, and in fact no later than 6 months after the end of the relevant financial year. Mr. President, this clause is further amended at subclause 21A, which provides for the Cabinet Secretary to transmit a copy of the aforementioned report to each permanent secretary. And finally, subclause 21B grants the Minister the power to table a copy of the report in the House of Parliament as soon as possible, but no later than the 31st day of December after the end of the relevant financial year. Clause 9 further repeals, Mr. President, in this case, 33K, L, M, and N of the Principal Act. And Clause 10 amends 33O and P, again by deleting Audit Commission and substituting the words Internal Audit Directorate wherever they appear. Clause 11 repeals and replaces 33Q with a new 33Q which speaks to the duty of care. It outlines that each member of an audit committee and each member of staff of the IAD is to act honestly and in good faith and exercise the care, diligence, and skill that a prudent man would exercise in carrying out their functions under the Act. Clause 12 amends 33R by deleting, again, Audit Commission and inserting, therefore, the words member of staff of the Internal Audit Directorate. And 13 addresses the language in the marginal notes of 33S. Clause 14 deletes 33T and substitutes a new 33T, which sets out that the minister may amend the first schedule subject to affirmative resolution. Clause 15 provides for the amendment of paragraph 1 of the first schedule by deleting Audit Commission and also deleting the words Audit Commission where it appears in 21, 31, 52, 6, and 7, and substituting, therefore, in each case, the words Cabinet Secretary. This clause is further amended by deleting the words Audit Commission in paragraph 9 and 10.2a, and substituting, therefore, in each case, the words Internal Audit Directorate. Mr. President, the clause is also amended by deleting subparagraph C and renumbering D to F as C to E. Clause 16 repeals the second schedule of the Principal Act, and 17 provides for the amendment of Section 31 of the Local Government Financing and Financial Management Act by deleting its subsection 3. Mr. President, just to remind that sorry, just checking something here, just to remind. Right, that Schedule 2 addresses, the Schedule 2 which is amended, addresses the composition of the Audit Commission, and therefore it will be, it was now made applicable to the new functions under the IAD. Mr. President, Jamaica continues to benefit from the policy on categorization and rationalization of public bodies. We are achieving operational efficiencies, and this is part of the holistic approach to improving how it is that the country is governed. The reintegration of the Audit Commission into the Ministry of Finance, such that its important functions are undertaken by the Internal Audit Directorate, is a move that will continue to keep Jamaica in good financial stead. And it is in this context that I ask colleagues to make their contributions on this bill and ultimately for its support and passage. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Minister. Senator Bunting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the opposition has no fundamental objection to this bill, essentially moving some responsibilities from a freestanding body to a department within the Ministry of Finance. The larger concern that we have, though, is that the care and skill that a prudent man would exercise in his business that the minister referred to, that our audit committees and indeed our boards more generally and the directors who are appointed to that, we still see significant tardiness in terms of compliance with the law or the individual statutes. Some agencies or statutory bodies have their own statute which sets out those that are that don't have specific timelines set out in their legislation would fall under the general Financial Administration and Audit Act and the other public sector bodies legislation. And generally speaking,
they require annual reports, including audited statements, to be tabled within 6 months, typically, of their year end. But I just checked the website of the Cabinet Office, which shows you the dates of the reports that last went to Cabinet. And this is as of October 2nd. So I don't know if anything may have happened in the last month, but I suspect not. And when you look at entities like the JUTC, which control billions of dollars and lose billions of dollars every year, we see that the last report to Cabinet is for 2017-18. That's 5 years behind. And this is not an agency incidental to, it's not something that has ceased operations and maybe just winding down and therefore isn't being actively managed. National Works Agency, tens of billions of dollars spent by National Works Agency. 2015-16, Senator Webby is the last year for which a report has been submitted to Cabinet. Mr. President, I don't think this has to be a political issue or a partisan issue. By any standards of good governance, this is just unacceptable. We wouldn't accept it in our private companies, Senator Webby, and I don't think we should accept it here. And whatever mechanisms we put in place, Mr. President, legislation-wise or structurally, until we start holding the directors, the chairman, the chief executive officers accountable, then we're not going to get the improvement. I mean, just this week, we were all concerned with the earthquake, the 5.6 earthquake that we had on last Monday. And, the delays before we heard anything from ADPEM. A lot of commentators have been saying that, ADPEM's communication was lacking during for 6 hours they heard nothing from ADPEM after the quake. When do you think the last annual report for ADPEM went to Cabinet? 2015, 2016. This is not suggesting a well-managed operation. This is not suggesting a well-managed operation. And for agencies that are so critical to the performance of government and to delivering service to the people of Jamaica, I think we must do better, Mr. President. And I see you nodding, and I know you agree with me that we cannot, as a parliament, which is charged constitutionally with oversight of the executive, accept this type of performance. So this is really just bringing home the importance of whether we call it the Audit Commission or whether it's a freestanding body or whether it is a unit within the Ministry of Finance. But we can't stop at just setting up structures and passing legislation. We have to use these structures and these legislations to hold people accountable. And if year after year we come back and, you're not going to make an issue of somebody that's a few months behind for one reason or the other. But when we're talking 7, 8 years behind, this is just absolutely unacceptable. And I think we need to start in the reappointment, as most of these boards come to Cabinet for review. And I think that when you're reappointing persons who have presided over this situation, which everyone would agree is unacceptable for extended periods of time, then I think the responsibility then comes to cabinet to say, no, we're not going to keep reappointing boards and directors that cannot maintain minimum standards of governance. So with those few words, Mr. President, I say we are supportive of the general piece of legislation, but legislation is necessary but not sufficient for us to get good governance.
Thank you, Senator Bunting. Senator Webby.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and morning, colleagues. Senator Bunting, I think you had raised this previously in terms of accurate reporting and timely reporting, and you're 100% correct that in the private sector, it is unheard of for companies to have accounts 5 years behind. Colleagues, timely and accurate reporting is the basis of good governance. One thing that I'd say, however, is that we need to ask ourselves and understand why, because this has been a perennial problem for decades in terms of government accounts being extremely late, and 5, 6 years is really unheard of. So I would recommend, colleagues, that, and maybe it is for the Internal Audit Directorate to do that, leader of the House, to do a comprehensive review of why these accounts are late. You know, we have been picking up in the private sector recently that the audit companies in Jamaica are being stretched because of lack of resources. And when I asked the question, believe it or not, and it's a big debate now, Senator Gale, that we have been having a significant amount of migration, especially to Canada, of qualified accountants. So they are even struggling in terms of keeping up with the quantity of work being done. And I'm not saying that is the reason, but we need to look at why. The other suggestion that I'll make is that we're referring to audited accounts. However, we will become very, very, very concerned if the management accounts, Senator Bunting and colleagues, are significantly behind. Because if management accounts are significantly behind, you're really inviting corruption in the respective units. And I would like to suggest that in the interim, if the audit accounts are not ready because of the lack of resources in the audit companies, let us get the internal audit department to certify that the management accounts are in order, although they are unaudited by an external body. So at least the cabinet can have a chart or a matrix to say, yes, the audited accounts are out, but the internal management accounts are up to date, and it has been certified by the internal audit and reviewed by the board. So that would be an interim, position. You know, colleagues, when we speak about merger and efficiency, the world has changed in terms of technology and the word efficiency. And while we can remove the Audit Commission and put it under the Internal Audit Directorate, there are some fundamentals in the audit world now that we have to embrace, including change management, because you know, you can make a legislative change, but if you don't change the systems, then you're not going to get the benefits that you're hoping for. And I have 4 recommendations to the Senate and to the wider Ministry of Finance that I think that we need to look at in terms of being a more efficient audit unit. The first one being is how we utilize technology to manage the various phases of internal audit function planning. The first one being the fieldwork, reporting, and post-audit follow-up. An end-to-end platform allows for better oversight and record keeping and helps to organize the follow-up process. You know, Senator Crawford, the company that I represent, We have companies all over the world. And there's technology in place that you don't have to physically visit those companies all over the world. But because of the software systems that we have in place in terms of audit, you can stay in Jamaica and do audits for the companies all over the world. And I say this, that we need to ensure that in government, that we have the latest audit tools so we can become more efficient in terms of the software that we're using to audit these various companies. And that would help in terms of accurate and timely reporting. We can't divorce, in terms of audit and our audit department, risk management. I was speaking about an earthquake, etc. Risk management and internal audit has to be closely correlated. In other words, we start off with the various risks, Senator Sinclair, in the various agencies. Your risk management unit shares that with your internal audit department, and you create an audit plan coming out of that risk. And I believe also that is going to be very important. The fourth recommendation that I'd make is the integrated platforms, which allows collaboration across 3 lines of defense. The first one, link audit planning with risk and compliance, self-test failures, and key controls help to focus the internal audit review. You have platforms such as Matrix Stream and Logigate that will fully integrate internal audit and risk management functions to allow for alignment on matters such as controls for common risk and controls testing. When you look at the research that I have done, there are about 30 audit committees across the government. And what you find, that there are gaps, because one agency may have a weakness in control, and another agency may have a weakness in control. But there's no sharing of information or cross-learning between these audit committees. In other words, they have the same problem. One has dealt with it in an efficient way, and one has the same problem. If we can create a database or a system that these 30 audit committees can share their experience in terms of how they resolve certain problems, that is going to increase efficiency. And I would like to suggest that we have a system in place where these 30 audit committees can have a database where they can share information in terms of weaknesses and controls. So Mr. President, I think this is an excellent move in the right direction in terms of our government becoming more efficient in terms of internal controls. And you're going to get other benefits because of that. And I wholeheartedly support this change, Mr. President. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Webby. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I think you derive a little pleasure from taking a while to allow me to speak, but I'm sure I'm mistaken. I'm sure I'm mistaken.
It's my exerting my control,
I think so. But thank you, Mr. President, with your leave, and I want to thank colleagues for their contributions today, and to say, as a former head of, legal and regulatory, and prior member of the Corporate Governance Committee of the PSOJ, I am someone who believes deeply in governance and the practice of it and the need for it to deliver better results, whether at the corporate or government level. And so your observations are shared and embraced on this side. And it's part of the work that is at play. The fact is that far too many statutory bodies, too many statutory entities have accounts outstanding, and they have been for across administrations. And I recall when we, in this administration, was able to finally welcome the NSWMA bringing their accounts up to date, which had been out across 2 administrations prior. This is a constant process to try to bring companies and entities that have poor management practices on board. And this has been why it has been so important for us to insist on competent board members, to try to bring in more people from the private sector, to bring their practices to help, to share best practices within the public service. And it has been doing us well, but it is still a difficult process. And I want to note the very practical suggestions that's been made by Senator Webby in respect of how the management accounts could be treated with as an interim process. And I'm sure I see the technical experts from the Ministry of Finance and Planning nodding, so I know they're taking note, good note of your suggestion, and that was not the only one which was good. The suggestion about the database, usefulness of rationalization as a policy of government and the particular utility of the rationalization that is being legislated for today. And it is in that context, Mr. President, that I ask for second reading of the bill and thank my colleagues for their contributions.
Thank you all, and I join in the Minister in welcoming the constructive presentations of Senator Bunting and Webby. The question is that the bill be read for a second time. Those in favor? Against?
A bill entitled, An Act to Further Amend the Financial Administration and Audit Act and to Provide for Connected Matters, read a second time.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. With the agreement of Senators Bunting and Johnson, I put clauses 1 to 10. Those in favor? Against? I put clauses 11 to 17. Those in favor? Against? I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Against? The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. I'm sorry, 1 minute, please. Ms. Lowe. Mr. Sinclair, you keep interrupting me now. There is no schedule, please. So. Thank you. Well done, Senator Sinclair. Nice try. I put the title and enacting clause. I have done that. The questions that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Against? I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister?
Might I ask for third reading of the bill?
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Thank you. Madam Clerk?
A bill entitled An Act to Further Amend the Financial Administration and Audit Act and to Provide for Connected Matters, read a third time and passed.
Madam, just before you rise, as usual, I have an update for Senator Brown. It's coming along much better. Still having some issues, which I recommended. Natural aloe vera. I recommended some natural aloe vera. So, based on my medical expertise, but yeah, both drink and as a topical application. It's very good, you know. So I'm advised. So he is coming along, and as usual, it's asked me to thank you all for your kind thoughts, those who have called him, and he is making steady progress, so hopefully we'll see him soon. Thank you. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. I won't question your medical expertise because I myself have suggested sun and taking breeze. So, which is the curative values of which I believe are highly underrated, but admittedly, again, not medically proven.
That's vitamin D, so that is medically proven.
All right, thank you, Mr. President.
But I noticed that Senator Webber never take us on with the natural aloe vera.
Mr. President, I must say we've been so efficient this morning that I feel minded to ask if there isn't something else on the agenda for us to take. But I say, Senator Bunting, giving me the evil eye. So I would just thank colleagues for their efficiency. I want to just take the opportunity, though, to advise Senator Morris, who has questions on the paper, on the other paper for today, that I actually just received the draft and hadn't had the chance to review it before today. So we should be able to answer your questions at the next sitting. So, Mr. President, with that, I would... Oh, I wouldn't be here either. We can do it at the week after when you're here. But they should be ready, is what I'm saying. It shouldn't be unduly delayed. All right, thank you. Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. Might the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed?
Thank you very much. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against, this Honorable Senate now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.